was widely expected that the Reserve Bank was not going to hike rates yesterday. Although we must confess, after the sell-off in the rand over the past week, we thought that there was a somewhat higher probability because of the impact of high exchange rates on the outlook for inflation. But in the Reserve Bank's inflation forecast up to the end of 2018, they kept the foreign exchange rate at levels prior to the sell-off. So their forecast may be slightly adjusted higher at the July MPC meeting, depending on what happens over the next couple of months. The reason then why they also decided not to hike rates was we've seen incoming data being quite weak. For example, manufacturing production in the third quarter could be flat, and there was a massive decline in mining production. So I think it sort of enhances, it shows the dilemma facing the Reserve Bank, where you see inflation heading higher, whereas growth remains relatively weak. So I think it was actually quite a wise decision of the Reserve Bank to pause at this meeting. The rand initially did sell off after the Reserve Bank announced that they are on hold, but we think it was more positioning. Our interest rates are relatively high compared with other developed economies and even some of the emerging markets. So we don't really see it as a negative factor. The Reserve Bank has already shown that it's a very credible Reserve Bank, that it takes its inflation targeting mandate very seriously. We saw that 50 basis point rate hike in January, that where the rand also sell off following the dismissal of Mr. Nene. Then the Reserve Bank had to communicate very strongly, it had to send out a very strong signal that it will do what it needs to do to curb inflation. So from that perspective, I don't think they had to show their hand again. So going forward then, we think that the rand will again be driven more by external factors. So in other words, what's happening with US interest rates, because up to last week the market thought perhaps that a rate hike in June is off the cards, and suddenly it's live again. So we have seen the dollar strengthening. And then in South Africa, we have quite a few SA-specific events. For example, S&P will announce our sovereign credit rating on June the 3rd. So with the US Federal Reserve expectations, the rand is very unlikely to decouple from other emerging market currencies. We will track them. As far as SA-specific risks, the risks are concerned, there could be more volatility in store. In the countdown to the meeting, there is a lot of event risk that can have an impact on the currency. So we expect volatility to remain high. Firstly, on June the 3rd, S&P will announce its country review on South Africa, and the markets are expecting a downgrade. Secondly, we have the FOMC meeting on June the 17th. So up to last week, where the market thought the probability of a rate hike was about 4%, it has subsequently increased to nearly 40%. And that normally is accompanied with a high level of volatility if your market implied rates differ from expectations. So the rand can be quite volatile during this period as well. And then perhaps what happens in times like these, investors tend to take a step to the sidelines. So trading volumes are sometimes lower, and then that contributes to high levels of volatility. Thirdly, there is also a number of wage negotiations taking place in South Africa. Eskom is busy negotiating, and they have put in an offer of 5%, which has been rejected by the trade union. And then we have the platinum negotiations also going to start taking place. So compared with 2014, where we had quite a prolonged strike, which affected the industry and the rand quite adversely, the outcome of this is going to be very important.